white trash racing. We're here today on a tutorial on how to change your timing belt on a LEXUS IS300 on the all famous 2JZ engine. So I'm going to start off the video. This is your first step. First step you're going to need to do is you're going to need to drain your coolant. In order to drain your coolant, you're going to need to come to the bottom of the car and remove that plastic panel. It has a bunch of bolts like this up underneath there. They're 10mm. Pop all those out of there. Once you do that, I'm going to come here on the right side of the vehicle, and right there you're going to see there is a valve. You're going to turn that and you're going to let your coolant drain. While that's going on, you can remove that upper radiator hose and your two brackets right here, and then take the clamp off of your lower radiator hose right there. And then, if you still got coolant in there, you might not want to pop it off. I want to let it drain, but pop that off. And then unhook these two wires here for your fans, and then hook that one down here for your temperature sensor. I've already got the alternator loose and the belt off. I forgot. If you need help with that, you're just gonna pop this 14mm bolt right there and put a wrench on that, and you're gonna push this thing down to release the belt. Once you got everything loose, the very last thing is you have to take these two coolant lines off down here. There's one there and one there. On mine it is just two hose clamps, so we're going to take those off and then pull the radiator out. Alright, the next step, we're going to remove this top cover. Next step, we want to remove these 4 bolts. They're a 5mm Allen. Okay, so the next step you're going to want to focus on once you get those covers off is removing this crank pulley bolt and the pulley itself. But there's a couple tools LEXUS makes and some other ways to get it off. But from what I've seen, the easiest way to do it is the starter bump method. Another way to do it is you can put an extension on your bar and rest it on the floor, but luckily my extension breaker bar is long enough to reach this frame right here, so we're going to rest it on the frame right there, and then we're going to go inside the car. We're going to turn the starter just a little bit, just a little blip, until that bolt comes loose, and hopefully it'll pop that off. There it is. As you can see, the bolt is loose from the pulley because the engine turns that way and the bolt turns that way, so it broke it loose. And that's the bolt. Okay, for this next step, I'm going to show you a couple steps ahead because the video got deleted, but you guys should be able to understand it. So in order to remove the crankshaft pulley from the actual crankshaft, you're going to need this tool. It's a harmonic balancer puller kit. If you open it up, inside you're going to see this. You're going to use these 2 bolts, just 2 of them. Some of these have 3. If yours has 3, you're going to use 3. You're going to screw them into here, and you're going to use this one, and it's going to run through the center of that, and then pretty much gonna go like that, one on each hole here, and you're gonna use it to pull the crankshaft off. You're gonna turn that center bolt inwards, and it's going to pull this pulley off the crankshaft. So if you look down here, let me try to visualize that again. You're gonna have it on here, and that big black bolt is gonna push off the crankshaft and pull this off the crankshaft. Before we take this crank pulley off, you guys want to make sure you you want to put the engine at TDC, and if you see there's both these marks, and they're going to line up with this little dent on the top, and then there's a 15-degree mark a little bit off to the side. The 15-degree mark is a dot, the line is your timing marks. You want to make sure those are pointed straight up. After that, you're going to come right here, and it's kind of hard to tell, but this is one cover and this is another cover, and this is where they meet. You need to take out that bolt right there, and I think there's a bolt inside there, and then you're going to take off that bolt. Okay, I forgot to mention this, but there's 3 12mm bolts on this, and you will have to remove that in order to get to the next step. Okay, for this next step, you're going to want to remove that bolt, these are all 10mm. You're going to remove that bolt and that bolt. Okay, and then there's this one back behind here. See, it's hiding. So you're going to turn this so you can get to them. You're going to remove this one. You're going to loosen that one, or you can remove it. And then so you're going to pull this one out like that. And then once you pull this one out like this, it's going to drop. And now you can access that bolt right there. Let me put these over here. Pop that guy off there real quick. Once you get that off, now you have access to the timing belt and your water pump and everything else. Alright, the next step, there's 2 bolts right here for your tensioner for the timing belt. I've already removed them, and there's 1 bolt right there for the tensioner of the timing belt, the actual pulley part. I'll show you what I'm talking about. This right here with those 2 bolts is going to be sitting just like that up in there. Okay, you're going to remove those 2 bolts. They're 12mm. This bolt right here is a 10mm Allen head, and that one is the one you're seeing sitting like that. It goes into that hole. So you're going to remove both of those. Once you get those off, you're going to pull your timing belt off, and then we're going to start removing the water pump. Alright, once you have removed all the bolts from your water pump, you'll be left with this sitting here like that. The next step will be to remove this. It bolts on right there. You're going to remove the 2 10mm bolts out of that, and you'll be left with this and this little guy. That is an important step. Do not skip that. Also, there's those 2 12mm right there. They're 12mm nuts, and they bolt onto that water jacket. Remove those, and this thing will pop off. The reason why you must take this off is because you don't want these O-rings right here to leak. You need to replace these O-rings here. You need to replace that O-ring there. And there is another O-ring right here we're going to need to replace. On that one, I'm just going to put a slight bit of Right Stuff or any antifreeze or oil resistant silicone on both sides of the gasket because it's in really good shape. Main thing is you just don't want to do this job and end up with a leak in the very end. So you need to take all the precautions necessary. Looks like that is a R28. R28 O-ring fits right there. Right there. Alright, once you get all your seals changed, find all your seals, get those swapped out, it's going to be time for reassembly of everything. At this point, if you had any cam seals or a crankshaft seal that was leaking oil, this would be the time to do it. There is other videos, this is not the one, but if you need to change your camshaft seals, you will have to remove the intake manifold and the valve covers in order to do that. In order to remove and replace the crankshaft seal, you just have to remove this here gear with a puller that you already have, the same one you used to remove the crankshaft. If you're not doing that, it will be time to proceed to the next step. Alright, once you have everything cleaned up, go ahead and put that piece right there back on. Don't forget your O-ring in the back behind that, and then put a little bit of silicone, like I said, on that gasket unless you have a new one, and we'll go to the next step. Alright, go ahead and install your O-rings into this thing, and then install that that sleeve back into this. Lube up the O-ring on the sleeve on both sides before you stick it in this and before you stick it into the water pump housing. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to try to get this little guy to go in that hole right there. Alright, go ahead and install your water pump and install all the bolts that you took out of it in the same position that you took them out from. Since the housing, you know, is 20 years old or 15 years old, I cleaned it off really good, and I used some copper spray gasket on only that side, because then if someone ever takes it off, well, that's not really the important part, I guess, but mainly just because that's the only side that's damaged. This side on the water pump is brand new, so I don't expect it to leak, but I don't want it to leak on that side. Like we said, you want to take every precaution possible. Alright, on things like this where you could get the torque wrong and end up with a problem like a leak, I like to torque it down. Even though it's not a critical engine component, still like to torque it down. So what I did is I didn't look up any torque specs, but I pretty much know just by the size of the bolt that these little ones right here, don't put any more than 10 foot-pounds on those, anywhere from 7 to 10 foot-pounds. And then these ones, you can do 16 to 18 foot-pounds. I ended up with 18 foot-pounds on these bigger ones and had no problem with that. Okay, this next step is very critical. Make sure you apply grease to the surfaces on this bolt here, and apply blue Loctite to the threads. Do not forget to grease that bushing and put Loctite on this threads. Once you do that, go ahead and install it back into its location. Go ahead and torque down that bolt. Not sure the exact torque spec, but I'd say about 36 foot-pounds. Alright, the next step is you're gonna install your tensioner about halfway. So you're gonna put both the bolts in halfway. Then you're gonna put your belt on, and then you're gonna line up that mark with that indent, and you're gonna line up that mark with that indent. See, there's a line and a dot. You're gonna line up the line with the indent on top right here. There's another indent on top right there, and those need to line up. Then you're gonna go down here on the bottom And you'll notice right there, there's a line and a dot. The line, see that line right there, and that dot, and that line right there also has to line up with this tooth on your thing. So that tooth runs to that line, to that dot. There's also another dot, but that is for, there's a dot down there, but that's not the one you're looking for. You need the line, not the dot. Once you have all the lines lined up, go ahead and tighten your tensioner the rest of the way. These are a couple quick tips to make sure that you get the timing right. Once all these marks are lined up, this has to have minimal slack in between, okay? You can't have a whole bunch of slack because then your marks might not really be true. And then on this side where it pulls, this must be also have minimum slack. You need to turn this. This has to be the, you can't get any more out of that. That's what it needs to be. You need to have this as tight as possible on this side in order to make sure that all these marks are correct. So what you would do is you would start with lining this one up, pull all your slack out, then line that one up, and then pull all of your slack out again and line up this one. And then once you do that, take all the tension out and make sure all the marks are still on the right spot again before you pull this tensioner. Also make sure that all your bolts are tight and that you have that O-ring in there, because once you do this, it's not like there's no turning back, but you're gonna have to put this thing in the vise and put this thing back in it, and it's a whole another process. So just take a couple minutes and make sure everything is correct before you pull this pin right here. There it is. Now you have complete tightness. Make sure all your marks are still lined up. Do not time this thing wrong. Make sure it is timed correctly 3 or 4 times. Just double, triple check it. Next, we're going to install this timing belt cover. You got 5 bolts for it. And then there's the one behind the power steering pump. Don't forget that one. Right at this point, it's pretty much basic reassembly of what you took apart. Just gonna give you a brief rundown, and I'll break it down every time I put on a part. But you're gonna put that on, you're gonna put your other cover on, finish bolting up everything. I took this off because I need to get a new pulley. You don't have to do that. You also apparently didn't have to take this off. Well, you do if you're replacing the water pump, so never mind about that anyways. Put your pulley back on for the water pump, put your crankshaft pulley back on, put your wires back on here, if you undid those. Put your radiator back in, put your fans back in, top it off with coolant. But yeah, let's get going a little further and get this thing started up. Make sure the timing is where we want it to be. Alright, we got our top cover on. We end up swapping just the bearing inside the pulley because that was the only thing that we had available today. We got the new belt on there, the serpentine belt. Everything is tight. So now we're going to put the radiator in and we're going to test fire it real quick. And then once we confirm that the timing is on and the car's running good, we're going to finish putting everything back together. Do not start the car without the radiator because of these and these transmission lines down here, they will start to spray out transmission fluid. It's hard to do this with one hand, but make sure you put these radiator lines on the bottom here. Make sure your radiator drain is tight before you add antifreeze, and while you're down here messing with these hoses here, and then plug that guy in too. Put your key in. It's vibrating a little bit, but I think that's just due to the fact that I don't have this hooked up. You know, the mass airflow sensor is not hooked up, so seems to be running good. Sounds really good. So let's go ahead and finish putting everything back together, and then we'll take it on a test drive. Make sure that it's good to go. Alright guys, once you follow all those steps, you'll end up right here where we're at with a complete 2JZ with a brand new water pump and timing belt and all the stuff that goes along with it. I like to always wash the engine off when I'm done. Make sure that everything is real clean. Anything that I worked on, I like to make sure that you know what I mean, that all the antifreeze and just anything like that is not on the car anymore. So but anyways, thanks for watching guys. If this video helped you, please like the video, throw me a comment if you have any suggestions or anything to say, and don't forget to subscribe to White Trash Racing. See you on the next video.